Today's episode comes from a listener question, and it's an area familiar to me. I did my PhD research on it and wrote my first book about it. It's also a really interesting question. Did the people that used Roman coins actually follow the rules? Or were they sneaky? Did they bend the rules behind the backs of the emperors and other officials to get what they wanted? As we've seen on this podcast, Roman money was debased over time, and in some cases, quite rapidly and suddenly. Did these devaluations trigger merchants haggling in the markets of Rome, or soldiers or officials peeking over everyone's shoulders, checking to see if they were charging the right prices and taking the right coins? It's a question that gets at daily life in ancient Rome, how the economy of Rome actually worked in practice. Did Roman coin users trust their coinage? We'll answer that question on today's episode of the Pax Romana podcast. Questions and answers for: did Romans trust their own money? I have to say, I wasn't surprised to get listener questions about Roman money and the Roman economy. The podcast episodes I've done on those topics have been very popular, lots of listeners, with the most popular of those being episode 73, The Collapse of the Roman Monetary System. And so you can check that one out either before you listen to this episode or perhaps after, if you want some more information about the Roman monetary system and its collapse in the 3rd century AD. And as I've said on this podcast, Roman coins were money, but they weren't just that. They were power, they were propaganda, sometimes they could be a real headache. Roman emperors stamped their faces on gold aureus coins, silver denarius coins, and other copper pieces used for smaller change, and the values of those coins were set by law. The exchange rates are pretty simple. I won't talk about all of them, but effectively, one gold aureus was the most valuable coin. That was worth 25 silver denarius coins, and then the denarius coins were worth certain numbers of bronze coins. But here's the catch. Not all Roman coins were made to the same standard. Now, in the first 2 centuries of the Roman Empire, emperors messed with the metal content, taking away a bit of silver or lightening the coin weight overall. These changes were mostly gradual. There was one sudden debasement under Nero in AD 64 or AD 65, following the Great Fire and the beginning of construction on his Golden Palace. These were very expensive issues in the city of Rome, and it's not surprising that Nero may have debased his coinage in order to pay for them, rather than have to raise taxes or find additional silver somewhere else. He just debased the coins. Nero hid those debasements. The idea was to deceive people, suggesting to them that the denarius was not lighter, that it did not contain less silver, and this suggests that Nero, or at least the people that minted his coins, knew that at the very least the population would be sensitive to changes in the weight or silver content of those coins, and also that perhaps there would be economic consequences, maybe price inflation, maybe people would stop trusting the money, or maybe even people would set their own values to the currency. And this has been a question that historians have wondered about for a long time, and there's no definitive answer as to whether people were free, or if they weren't free, chose to anyway, changed the values of Roman coins on their own, despite the fact that they were supposed to stick to the values set by the emperors. In addition to there being legal values set between Roman coins of different denominations, there were also fixed exchange rates between Roman coins and non-Roman coins that were supposed to be obeyed when the money was changed. So if a person went from Rome to Egypt, they had to change their Roman coins at a fixed rate for local Egyptian coins. And right in the middle of the Pax Romana, in the early 2nd century AD, we actually have a letter written in Egypt, and it survives to this day on papyrus. It's from a man named Heliodorus, and he writes a letter to his brother, and he says this: a gold coin and drams has changed from 15 to 11. That's Baden Papyrus 37. It's kind of a cryptic note. It tells us, presumably, that the value of a gold aureus is now different compared to the value of the local Egyptian silver coins. Unfortunately, the Greek text in the letter is a little bit unclear. So dram could also be shorthand for tetradrachm. Those were larger silver coins that were minted in Alexandria, and they had a 1-to-1 exchange rate with Roman denarius coins. What's even weirder about the letter is that neither of those figures, 11, 15, none of those correspond to what we know was the legal exchange rate between a gold coin and a silver coin, whether it was a denarius or a tetradrachm. And that is 1 to 25, the same rate that I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode. So it's weird. Did the rate drop from 15 to 11? If so, does that mean this letter acknowledges that the going rate in the market was already much lower than 25 to 1, and it in fact got even lower? What it sounds like, from this letter at least, cryptic as it is that people traded Roman gold coins at whatever value they decided on the local market, at least in Egypt. It didn't matter what the law said. And in fact, if anything, such law-breaking could be openly talked about and documented, which suggests that the officials either turned a blind eye or maybe even allowed the practice. So it seems like coin users could bend the rules, but did they do it often? Well, let's look at the coins themselves, and we can do this because researchers only recently have been given permission to drill in to several hundred Roman coins. They make a very fine hole in the coin and analyze the metallurgical content of those coins, allowing us to actually peek inside Roman money. So we know that the Emperor Nero in the 1st century AD slashed the amount of silver in the denarius, making them less pure, and that has been confirmed through these drill point analyses of coins that were minted after that debasement. Nero took out about 20% of the silver of those coins. We can compare that evidence to hoard evidence. Coin hoards are stashes of more than one coin deposited either on purpose or accident. And these hoards can mean a lot of things. They can represent a soldier leaving behind his money, and then he died in battle, and so he never went to return it. They could represent savings that for some reason weren't collected later. But what we can tell from many hoards that are deposited after the debasement of Nero is that the older coins that were minted before Nero's debasement were hoarded way more often than coins that were minted later. This is true of hoards both inside the Roman Empire and also some found outside in places like Romania, the Ukraine, or even India. This suggests that people were aware and sensitive to even small changes in the metal content of coins. Because although Nero's debasement was substantial for the Pax Romana, it was a drop in the bucket compared to what happened in the 3rd century AD. From sources from that period or just after, we see evidence of people naming Roman coins after emperors. These are coins that are all the same denomination, but they call them Philippii or Valeriani, right? Coins named after Emperor Philip or Emperor Valerian, for example, because the coins changed weight and fineness so often in the 3rd century. So you don't call the gold coin an aureus anymore, you call it a Valerianus, because Valerianus changed the weight enough and people noticed it. And these naming conventions suggest that people traded those coins at different rates. If gold standards are bouncing around in the 3rd century and gold is high value, people are not going to want to get ripped off even the tiniest bit. And so they make these naming conventions as a way to adjust to the debasements and weight changes. There's an inscription that was found in Nubia just outside Rome's borders, but tied to Rome through caravan trading routes, which mention gold aureus coins trading at a different rate than the official 25-1 with silver tetradrachms, which backs up the idea that people came up with tricks, conventions, and other accommodations that we probably don't even know about to ensure they were getting the most value possible for their money. But it was not just common people who were aware of the different values of coins and preferred higher quality coins to those of lower quality. A famous Roman educator, a man named Fronto, he was the tutor to Marcus Aurelius and his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus. We have in a letter of Fronto this comment to Marcus Aurelius when Marcus Aurelius was emperor. Quote, "Cleave to the old coinage. Coins of lead and debased metal of all sorts are more common in our recent issues than in the archaic ones, which are stamped with the names of Perperna or Trabianus. What then? Am I not to prefer for myself a coin of Marcus Aurelius or Lucius Verus or Antoninus Pius? Those coins are stained and contaminated and discolored and spotted. Yes, more spotted than a nurse's apron." What was Fronto saying here? Quality of coins mattered, and he judged a coin by who was on the face of it. And he's talking to the emperor himself. But Fronto feels perfectly fine speaking about his own personal preferences for Roman coins that were older, even saying that Marcus Aurelius's own coins were not as good as the older coins of the Roman Republic. It says a lot about coinage. It also, by the way, says a lot about Marcus Aurelius, who tolerated such direct comments to his face about his own coinage. So this gets me to one final question. How openly could people defy official values? It's one thing for the emperor's friend and tutor Fronto to say this to him, but would the emperors have tolerated widespread use of unofficial coin values in just about any urban market? Well, if the tax collector was nearby, probably not. We have some evidence from the early 3rd century that there were black market dealings in money. An imperial decree from AD 210 in the city of Mylasa in Asia Minor hints at shady black market currency exchanges. We also have a letter from the Emperor Julian, which is much later than anything we've covered yet. Julian was emperor in the 360s AD, but he complains about rich people secretly raising prices in the countryside where officials couldn't stop them. The fact is, in the Roman Empire, rural areas were far more difficult to control. There were fewer officials there, less oversight. Merchants and customers could haggle over coin values away from the prying eyes of Roman officials. So when I or any other historian mentioned the fact that over 2 centuries, coin standards were pretty stable in the Roman Empire, there is a little bit more to it. Those standards may have been stable because they weren't rigorously enforced everywhere. In other words, people weren't really always and everywhere actually trading at the official values. Evidence of flexibility is there if we look closely. But because this kind of activity was not officially sanctioned, even if it was permitted in some cases, it doesn't survive in a lot of sources. So did Roman coin users stick to the rules? Yeah, sometimes they did, especially when coins were consistent in terms of their quality and their weight, like under Augustus. But when emperors tweaked the metal content, especially suddenly or rapidly, people got creative. They may have added premiums, they may have favored old coins, or named coins after the emperors in order to keep track of rapidly changing values. Coin hoards show that they noticed shifts in quality, and daily life in the Roman Empire was clearly not just about obeying the emperor and even the rules of the marketplace. People could adapt, they could haggle, and sometimes even sneak around the system. So much like the Roman Empire itself, Roman money wasn't a monolith.
Thanks for listening to the Pax Romana podcast. For more information, including a list of primary sources and further reading, check the show notes. Music by Red Productions and Exocore. Follow Professor Colin Elliott on X at ProfCPE or email colin@paxromanapodcast.com. Listen to more episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or just about anywhere podcasts are available. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Pax Romana podcast.